Good evening. My Dear Meadows Student of the Month unfortunately had to go home today due to illness. So I would like to recognize her at the February board meeting along with our next Student of the Month. So next month I'll have two of them for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, my December Student of the Month for Tesonicus is Talia Collins. And Talia was nominated by Mrs. Lakin, so I'm going to put my glasses on and read what she had to say. So, it says, Talia has come so far this year. She is an amazing young lady and a friend to everyone. She works hard every day and gives 100%. She is kind to everyone and willing to help others when needed, and that is so true about her. I'm so proud of the growth Talia has made and enjoy having her in our class. She is a wonderful girl. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you.
Good evening. For the middle school, our Student of the Month is Mary Strother, and she was nominated by Mr. Hammett. And he says that she is an amazing student who has worked through a lot of adversity with us going hybrid and our e-learning and everything else. She brought her grades from first quarter up to second quarter. And she's a very hard worker, and she's very positive with her other peers, and he really appreciates her in the classroom.
Braden in here. Come on up. So at the high school, our Student of the Month for December, well, first of all, our character trait was honesty. I kind of love this little story. Do you know this story? Okay. So basically, first of all, Braden, he's just a great kid. He knows everybody's birthday, it seems like. He buys them gifts. But getting to the honesty thing, we have finals at the end of the semester, and he's going to take a final, and he's kind of got to do a makeup one or do one early. And so they've got the test ready to go. And with the test, there's also another thing with that test, especially when you're kind of singled out. So they give him the test, and he's taking it, and then he comes back up, and like a minute later or 2 minutes later, he's like, I'm not really supposed to have this, right? As the answer key. I don't know how you don't get honesty for that, right? I would have taken a little bit longer. But anyway, congratulations, Student of the Month.
Yes, especially for our students and their families. We appreciate you attending tonight. You're definitely welcome to stay for the whole meeting. But with it being a school night, we also understand if you need to excuse yourself.
Okay, well, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. And the first item in the consent agenda is meeting minutes from December 14th, 2020, our regular board meeting minutes. And then from January 12th, 2021, we had a work session. Those meetings are to be approved. The minutes are to be approved also. So do we have any questions or comments on those meeting minutes? Hearing none, we'll go on to the allowance of claims and financial report. Mrs. Rowe. There she is. Hey, Corey.
Thank you, Corey. We're going to be looking at the December payrolls. There will be 2 regular payrolls in December. We also had a special payroll to pay out the teacher appreciation grant, and then we had a mini payroll in December. So we're gonna look at 4 of them today. Your first regular payroll was dated December 4th, 2020, for a total payroll of $420,125.54. Along with that payroll came the accounts payable for payroll taxes and retirement. Total accounts payable, $119,217.70. Next payroll would be the TAG, the Teacher Appreciation Grant, and the 3%. That was a special payroll held on December 11th for a total payroll of $233,762.10. Along with that payroll came the accounts payable. This is only partial on here. You're gonna see the turf payment for the 3% on my prepays. We had to split these out, and it was just easier to do it this way. So partially minus the turf payment for 3%, the total accounts payable for the TAG and the 3%, $73,313.32. Your second regular payroll for December 2020 was on December 18th for a total payroll of $440,457.26. Along with that payroll was the accounts payable for payroll taxes and retirement, a total of $125,842.96. And then the last was a mini payroll for an employee. As you can see, it was a small one. It was dated 12/23/2020 for $342.20. And on that one, we just had payroll taxes for a total of accounts payable of $52.36. Did anyone have questions about payrolls? No? Okay. Ready to move on to some mini AP for December? Okay. All right, so you're going to see in your packet mini accounts payable dated December 28th, 2020. And during the December, I believe it was the December meeting, you gave me permission to pay any outstanding invoices that we had to help us close out 2020 a little bit smoother and quicker. So we did have a total of, as you can see here, we had not quite a page of some accounts payable here for a total of $82,910.95. Did anyone have any questions on those?
What is that 1264, the big payment there? Tax wireless system.
Oh, which voucher number? I'm sorry, Brian.
1264.
1264. Oh, to Matrix. Oh, yes. This is for technology. This was a payment for our new wireless system that's going to be integrated. And Mr. Gimini, I believe that's in all buildings. Is that correct?
Wireless access points. Yeah,
Yes.
This is the wireless access point project.
And this would be for all buildings. Anyone else? Okay, we can go ahead and move on to prepays for December. We have prepays for the month of December dated 12/1 through 12/31/2020. I'd like to point out a couple that were unusual on here. You'll see on voucher number, it's about halfway down, 80777. The total is $360,472.28. If you'll remember back in April, we took out a tax anticipation warrant. It was right at the very beginning of COVID. And there was all kinds of buzz that we may not receive our entire distribution for the spring and possibly the fall. So I tried to be proactive. We went ahead and we did a tax anticipation warrant for the operations fund. We did not have to use that money. We were very fortunate, and we did receive our full distribution for spring and for fall this year. So this was just basically the repayment on that. So of course, the total prepays for the month of December are going to be considerably higher. And then of course, as usual, the biggest payment is to the insurance trust. So total prepays for the month of December 2020, $700,000. $479.28. Did anyone have questions about the prepays? Okay. Are we ready to move on to this regular claims?
Sure.
Okay. All right, we've got regular claims dated today, January 25th, 2021. I will first ask anyone if they have any questions before I point anything out. We've had some renewals on here, so there's going to be some things on here that you do not see on a regular basis. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. No? Okay, so total claims dated today, January 25th, 2021. Total is $199,972.25. And are we ready to move on to the fund report? Okay, all right. So in your packet, next in your packet should be the fund report. Ending balance December 31st, 2020 in education, $841,826.10. Ending balance in operations, $1,444,066.95. Total for all funds at the end of 2020, $7,476,684.63. And then last in your financial packet, you should have the depository statement and bank balances. Again, the balances for the banks, they're at the top, minus any outstanding checks. The total for fund balance for all banks is $7,476,684.63. If you compare that with your fund balances, they balance to the penny. I'd like to submit for approval.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next item on the agenda are the personnel reports, which are posted online and on the door of central office. So that is the end of the consent agenda. If there are no questions or comments, can we get a motion to approve the consent agenda? So moved. Second. Okay, a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is reports. And first is our Assistant Superintendent report. Dr. French.
Good evening. So I'm going to be brief tonight. Just wanted to mention a few things. So first of all, we have NWEA testing happening, and just to kind of give you an explanation of that. So next to iStep and iLearn, the NWEA testing is our important testing as a district. And the difference between iStep and iLearn, where they focus on achievement, NWEA focus on growth. So you could have a second grader that it will show that they're reading at a 10th grade level. Vice versa, if you have a sophomore that's performing at elementary math level, it will show that too, and it will track that, which is why we take it 3 times a year. And so that helps teachers more than any other major assessment to help them instructionally to know how to teach kids. And so we're in the middle of our winter testing. We're wrapping that up this week. It's taking a little bit longer because we're working with hybrid schedules and virtual students who are trying to come in to do their testing. So that's just a teaser for next month when we have the results. So, and then the other thing I wanted to mention was this winter we worked with the building principals to identify a teacher innovator leader in each building. And basically this is a teacher who's already going above and beyond to try innovative things with technology in their classroom. And so it's basically giving them a platform to kind of showcase the things that they're already doing in their classroom, and meanwhile support other teachers in their buildings and act as a resource. And so we're excited about this, and they're going to continue to do that throughout the semester. So kind of a twofold goal there. But that's all I wanted to mention, and I'll have more data for you next month.
Okay, thank you. Cool, thank you. Next is the superintendent's report.
Yeah, so in your packet this month, I had just some general updates pertaining to the 2020 financial year end, as well as the 2021 budget. Or if you could pull up that slideshow. So these documents are actually in your packet. I think they're the last page, like that. But I just wanted to kind of just provide a kind of a 10,000 foot view of our 100,000 foot view of our finances here. So the first thing that I do throughout the year is I track the revenue that we receive for all of our funds, and track this against the amount that that is expected or that is budgeted for when we're doing the budget each year. So I wasn't a part of doing the 2020 budget, but I pulled the expected revenue amounts off of our 1782 budget order for 2020. And so if you start with the education fund, I track the state distribution each month, so that's the tuition support payment that we receive from the DOE. And then miscellaneous revenue could be any of those miscellaneous revenue things that we would receive for education fund, typically like student fees, reimbursements from the state for like summer school, things of that nature. And you can see the totals at the bottom in the red. We were projecting $12,858,000, and you can see that we ended with $12,488,000. So obviously we took in less. Obviously we made some adjustments even throughout the year to account for that in our budget, with our budgeting freeze, reducing staff through attrition over the summer. And so even moving forwards into 2021, we were much more conservative with our revenue estimates, because we don't want to end up in a situation to where we have a large shortfall. So that's something that we monitor, and Kelly and I talk about frequently. On the right hand side, you can see pension debt. We don't receive any property tax funds for that. All of that is through the local income tax. You can see what was projected at the top, just over 195,000. You can see that in total, we actually received 248,000. So we actually collected a little bit more than we anticipated there. So that's a real positive, and that's a good thing. Moving on to debt service. So the next slide, please. Moving on to debt service. Obviously, that's one of the funds to where the DLGF is going to make sure you collect what you need to in order to make your debt service payments. And so you can see these are all funded through property taxes, through excise tax, commercial vehicle excise tax, financial institution tax, and local income tax. And you can see that throughout the year, we receive, typically it's these funds in two draws. So the June draw and also the December draw. And you can see that property and excise tax, we collected more than what we anticipated. And then you can see for a couple of the smaller or other sources, we received less than what we expected. But overall, we ended to the good, up just over 116,000 in that fund. Moving down below that, the operations fund, again, kind of the same thing. Mrs. Romer had mentioned the payback of the tax anticipation warrants. So one of the concerns, obviously, in 2020 with the pandemic is that there was going to be a huge shortfall in property tax funds and some of those other revenue sources that we rely on to fund our operations within the school district. So Greencastle issued some tax anticipation warrants to potentially make up for that shortfall. Well, in reality, we see that while we didn't collect as much as we had hoped to, the amounts that we collected in total weren't nearly as bad. They were almost what we expected, although there was a slight shortfall in just under 500,000 in total. Some of the revenue revenue for the operations fund, because there are expenses for instance, such as my office and my salary that can't be paid out of the education fund. And so those salaries and benefits of that nature are transferred to operations. So we make a transfer. In 2020, we made a quarterly transfer to help with those costs. So you'll see that revenue there as well. But you can see that we actually shorted it because based on the revenue that we received in education fund, we collected less. So therefore, the 15% rule, in order to stay below that amount, we made an adjustment in December. So Corey, if you could move on to the next slide. So just kind of some talking points in total, just kind of looking at the trend and kind of how we end the year. We've seen a steady decline in revenue the last 3 years, and until 2020 we've seen expenditures go up. So one of the things I do is compare total collected revenues, total expenditures, in order to look at expenses versus, to look at revenue versus expenditures. And 2017, 2018, and 2019 year end, we overspent in our education fund, most recently in 2019 by over $400,000. But if you notice in 2020, we actually ended roughly, my numbers aren't, it's hard to read here on this page, are roughly $59,000 to the good. So we didn't dig into the deficit any deeper. So anytime we were looking at not replacing staff members, putting in the spending freeze in October, and just making those adjustments, that's helped us avoid an even larger shortfall than what we typically would. Because if you notice, 2019 total expenditures versus 2020. So in 2019, we spent $13.1 million in the education fund, and in 2020, 12.4. So all of those adjustments and things that we've made have helped us improve our situation, and that's something that we're going to have to continue to do moving forwards. So we improved our cash balance in the education fund by that $59,900. We decreased year-to-date expenditures by $747,504. And that's also with year-to-date revenue decreasing by $280,000. So all that attention to detail really goes a long way in helping with that, and certainly that's something we're going to continue to do, and we're going to continue to make adjustments moving forward so that we have a healthy cash balance, so that during lean times we don't have to borrow to make payroll and we don't end up in a bad situation. The next slide, please, is the operations fund. Again, comparing those similar things. The total revenue in the operations fund includes the transfer from the education fund. End of year cash balance increased by $102,000. While year-to-date expenditures decreased by $114,000. Year-to-date revenue increased by $36,000. So I think one of the items that's helped us is we've had some of the general obligation bond money that we've been able to use for some building projects and some improvements. Certainly that's helped us. But we've also made cuts to our operations fund, and that's something that we're going to continue to do moving forwards because we need to improve the total school district finances. So like a good example of that is we had a staff member leave at the high school, a secretary, and just based on looking at the total situation, we eliminated a position at central office to help with some of that savings. So it's kind of a multi-tiered approach with that. We did transfer $500,000 to the rainy day, and we transferred $450,000 last year. So we had mentioned that back when we were doing completing teacher negotiations and those things, that we were going to have to pay for the stipends, the one-time stipends that we gave to the teachers. But then also in 2021, we've budgeted for 5 certified staff members to be paid for out of the rainy day. So those dollar amounts, or excuse me, those funds are allocated to help with those costs. Shifting gears and talking about our 2021 budget order. So we did receive our 1782 notice from the county, and on the page in your board packet or on the screen, I've put the 2020, but then I also put the 2021. And so if you remember when we were going through the budgeting process, I had mentioned that we were advertising obviously at a much larger rate because we wanted to protect our levies. And we were also budgeting on 85% of our assessed value. Well, so when we got our certified budget, if you're looking on the right-hand side, assessed valuation grew by just over $15 million. And so in order, with that, $15 million over last year, but then in using the actual assessed value, that obviously causes the rate to fall back to where it's supposed to be. And so I won't read through all of those items, but you can see what we budgeted and what we expect to collect in our levy. So we expect to collect some additional money over last year in our levy, but then our overall rate actually dropped by just under half a penny. So $1.3620 will be our overall rate in 2021. So just a little bit of information on that. That was a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions or anything on that? But I'll continue to bring that information throughout the year so that you're updated as we make changes and do other things. The other thing I wanted to mention is we got a report back from the Department of Education, and so we had our summer food service review was conducted in December, and so the summer food service program was the extra feeding program that we offered during COVID, and I just really like to thank Mrs. Carrico and the cafeteria staff because they had an awesome review and passed with flying colors. So that's not easy, and that's a lot of hard work and making adjustments on the fly. And so it was extremely, extremely positive. But that's all I have for this month for my superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is old business. We have no old business, which leads us to new business. And the first item is an approval request to cancel outstanding checks that are 2 years old and older. And that request comes from the middle school and high school ECA treasurer, as well as the corporation treasurer.
Yep. So this is a customary thing, and all of these checks fall within that timeline, and so we need the board to provide approval to cancel those outstanding checks. And in your board packet was a list of those items. So this is a routine process.
I'm always surprised that some of these are sitting out there. I make a motion. They have long enough to try to get them.
Yeah, I'll second that. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is an approval request for an updated 2021 bus purchase.
Yeah, so this isn't these buses have already been ordered, but in the original approval letter, the incorrect dollar amounts were used. It wasn't. We used the dollar amounts at the top rather than the total with all of the features. Sticking up here. So the 84 passenger Bluebird bus was a total of $137,748.68, and the Midwest International Collins bus was $63,236.46. So the 84 passenger bus, I think, was roughly $14,000 more expensive, and then the International Collins was $8,000 more expensive. But we already had these items allocated in our 2021 budget, so there's no issue with that. So we are requesting official approval based on those updated figures.
Jeff, this is pretty much in line with what we normally do.
Yes, that's correct.
I make a motion we approve this request. Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is an approval request for the 2021 appointment to Greencastle Human Relations Commission.
Yeah, so we already have a student appointed to that commission, and I apologize if I mispronounced the name, but it's Dejan Martinez, and so we're just seeking approval to reappoint him to that commission. Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
I make a motion.
Here we have a motion and a second to reappoint Dejan Martinez to the Human Relations Commission. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is an approval request for the resolution to extend FFCRA through the end of the 2021 school year.
Yeah, so the FFCRA is the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. So the federal legislation actually expired at the end of December, but then was extended through the end of March. And so this deals with employee leave for specified reasons due to the COVID-19 pandemic, for instance, having to quarantine. We provide up to 10 days or 80 hours of coverage for paid leave for staff to use for those qualifying reasons. And all I'm wishing to do is continue that through the end of the 2020-21 school year. We're not refilling the allotment, but those staff members who have not yet used their allotted leave, should they qualify based on one of those reasons, I think it's reasonable for them to be allowed. And so we just need to pass a resolution to do it.
Makes sense. Okay, can I get a motion to pass this resolution?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, next item on the agenda are a bunch of donations, which I think we can approve all together. First, from Brock and Mary Beth Kaiser to the Greencastle High School Band in the amount of $500. From Prime Real Estate to Greencastle High School Baseball in the amount of $1,000. From the Indiana Department of Corrections to Greencastle High School Athletics in the amount of $1,000. From the Putnam County Community Foundation to Tezonicus Intermediate in the amount of $500. From the Putnam County Community Foundation to Deer Meadow Primary in the amount of $500. From Greencastle McDonald's to Deer Meadow Primary in the amount of $570. And from Mary Allison Children's Trust to Deer Meadow Primary in the amount of $500. And from the Michael Tezonicus family to Food Services at the Tezonicus Intermediate in the amount of $1,000.
I say thank you to everybody.
Yes.
Make a motion to accept.
He's just part of the night. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve all of the donations. Any questions or discussion? Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Final thing under new business is the GCSC Facilities Study and Master Planning presentation.
Yep. And so we have Mike and Kevin Montgomery from KRM. And Corey, if you could pull up their presentation.
Hello. All right. So thank you guys for having us back. We're at the end of the study phase. Again, my name is Kevin Montgomery, and with me is Mike Montgomery. We're going to spend about 15 minutes going through a condensed summary packet of slides. You should also have just received the final printed version of the full study. So just as a reminder, this took about the last 4 months, and we tried to involve as many participants as possible from staff and educators, the board itself, as well as public. Next. It's broken into really 4 parts. At the beginning, you'll read a little bit about the goals, and the whole overall study was supposed to address your needs for the next 5 to 10 years. I'll summarize the goals by, it was about safety, security, and access holistically, so not only physical access, but access to the spaces and type of services that your educators needed to be able to provide the next generation of education. And then the next section of the book goes into really the needs, which was the assessment by ourselves, working with your facility staff. And then we give possible solutions at this point to some of the greater needs, so that we have some understanding of what the scope of work to reach and address those needs would be. And then once we have an idea of the solutions, we create an overall cost summary. Next. I'm briefly just going to highlight a few things at each building as we went through the assessment. The easiest way was to pull out some of the photographs. There's more detailed description within the book. So overall, what we call the campus, which is your middle school and high school properties, probably the most notable or largest item shown here is the track, and then the field within, both needing maintenance, and the track really being nearing the end of its life within the next 2 to 3 years. Next. Moving to the high school, your oldest and largest building does have the largest amount of needs found. The one I would probably highlight here is the science labs. The spaces have been unrenovated since the building was built, and changes, but also just end-of-life items all throughout the science wing. Next. At the McAnally Center here, there's obviously amazing spaces and in great condition like this one that we're in. As you get kind of deeper into it, though, would highlight the locker rooms. Really minimal to no changes since the beginning, except dividing them smaller and smaller as you added more sports. When they were built, there were no girls' athletics at all. So it's those type spaces throughout the building that really need the most attention. Next. At the middle school, this kind of falls in the middle of your buildings. Decent list, but not like the high school. Again, probably most notable is the science lab. Right now it's configured to all 3 science rooms share one lab, and today's education is really much more focused around lab and hands-on activities, and they're kind of handcuffed in that access. Next. Deer Meadow is one of your newer buildings, relatively good condition. Cosmetically, there's things, but they don't move near as high up the list, don't match as many of the goals that were given to us, but there is a security issue at the entrance. There's no secure vestibule protocol in this building. Next. Grid path, overall, again, better. We would say there's definitely some immediate needs though on the exterior. Kind of in this upper corner here, you can see some of the materials around the facade are starting to fail. Small replacement, but mostly maintenance and repair type items around the exterior should really be addressed as soon as possible. Next. TZ has a longer list, has a lot of things that are nearing the end of the life, but not there. So in the next 5 to 10 years, this building it'll have more priorities that move up the list, we think. Right now, though, the highest ones are to deal with water. Really, the original design never addressed that appropriately, so it's deteriorating the soffit and the edge of the roof, and the eaves, without having any type of guttering or downspout. And then not leading it away from the building is also creating problems below grade and around the site. So that would be where we would recommend the most focus at this site. Next. Just as a snapshot, we did have work with some engineers and review your utilities and energy bills and systems of the buildings. Overall, it's pretty impressive considering the age of several other buildings that you fall pretty much on average with your utility costs, except for Deer Meadow, which is the newer building. So we believe it'd be worth it to look further into that, which we're recommending we can help with, obviously, and see why that's off. Next. And then each building includes, like I said, there's more details throughout, but then it has really the summary of all the issues that we found and creates some hierarchy. Red being the most immediate, blue being highly recommended, and then green being ideal, but mostly cosmetic focused. So we just pulled one out for these slides. So this is the high school, again, the largest building. You can see in red, that's the science labs that we already spoke of. Also, you have Media Center. It's outdated in its layout and function and furniture, but it's also has moisture issues. It doesn't have access to daylight and the programming spaces that really a Media Center kind of today would need. There's certain restrooms that haven't been updated. And then moving into the blue, it gets into several areas that are too small, not maybe designed properly for the activities and group learning, the cafeteria setting, and how a gymnasium would like to be used. All those fall within the blue, as well as some more finished items and furniture in the classroom setting that again just haven't been updated in over 40 years. Next. And then the next kind of section of the study focuses on those possible solutions. Here we highlight kind of overall in the campus. I'll just pull out a few of the bigger items. We talked a lot at the beginning about the access to the baseball and softball, and how really you have all of your buildings and the football field that limit access back to those fields. So we worked a few different designs to how to add access. Overall, your site is already really tight, and you're pretty much landlocked in the future. So after struggling with that issue, staff came up with the suggestion or idea that you have additional property at the transportation lot. And so we'll show that layout here in a second, but that freed up that space and really solved the access problem, and potentially not only gives you some more space for practice today, but in the future, whatever those needs might be 10, 20 years down the line, now you're going to have some of that space and not feel so landlocked. The next major piece is that connector. This came up really early on in discussions with that safety and security. Kids are traveling all day back and forth between two different buildings. So we have proposed a connection between those two. We'll show in floor plan in a little greater detail. Otherwise, or with that, I should say, propose a new service drive that would come around the back, so that you don't feel, right now it feels like it would be impossible to block that off because it's highly used to get between the buildings as well. solve that. Beyond that, there's some maintenance items in the parking lots, potential for kind of a gateway feature piece that would access kind of both fields, give a little bit of school pride at the entrance as we kind of do updates to the parking lot as well. Next. Just briefly showing that additional property that you guys own by your transportation center. Baseball and softball fit easily, as well as tennis. We've talked that tennis, the courts are fine now. Wouldn't propose moving them. Nothing needs to go there at this time. But when you're ready to invest in rebuilding and resurfacing them, you might want to explore. And we would leave space at this site, kind of for that same reason, just more flexibility in the future. You could have connection on both the north and south of your property, and added parking as necessary with ample space. Next. Okay, so here's an example. We'll do one of these for each school, but the solutions, which isn't to say everything would need to be done at the same time or anything like that, but this was trying to solve as many of those discovered needs as possible, all within one floor plan here. So I'll point out, here to orient everyone, that's that connector piece between Mack and Alley, so we're sitting right in here. Not only would there be a secure connection, but there's an opportunity to then fill in that space that's about the same size as an additional court, which was requested on many levels from many different schools for many different reasons. And we agree, especially compared to peer schools, the amount of gym space that they have. They're not only used after hours and providing additional space, which limit how late kids are on campus, but also throughout the day. There's a lot of activities that are being used in these multi-purpose gyms. It would be against your existing gym that's unable to be used because of where the walls were put in that can actually be removed. They're non-load bearing. So you basically gain potentially 2 courts to be used, renovating the science labs in place, renovating the media center with the possibility of expansion and making it a more dynamic space into the courtyard, making it a group learning, kind of all hours of the day used space. Moving over to Mack and Alley, you can see the goal was to find and improve the locker situation, and there's 2 big pieces that are taking up space on that lower level. Is the wrestling room and the weight room, which are both drastically undersized themselves. So that potential new weight room and wrestling room could be in the basement of that connector to move them out of the way, create new space for them, but also then rework and renovate all the locker room spaces to get equal boys and girls, both home and away, locker rooms. Next. At the middle school, the most critical item again would be that science renovation, at least some upgrades to the media center. There's a lot of different solutions that we've discussed in scope, and then also a secure entrance. This is one of the 2 buildings, one of 3 buildings that does not right now have any secure entrance. So there's a possible solution that we worked with the staff on how to reorganize that safest and most efficient manner. Next. Deer Meadow, like we said, not a lot of critical priorities on this one other than that secure entrance. Next. Rid path is similar, but does have a couple other requested needs. They're outdated, some finishes, also some restroom work. Again, reminder, most of this project has, the largest dollar needs are around that exterior and maintaining some of the failing items outside. Next. Again, TZ, it's all highlighted because there's finishes and some other small issues throughout, but they are really potentially more like a 5 to 10 year timeline probably for end of life, except for the water conditions that will continue to worsen if not addressed fairly immediately. Next. So reaching the end, this is a summary of the 76 items that could be addressed. We feel like we've worked with staff and leadership and the board to prioritize as best possible. That process can continue with whatever design process you guys would elect. We color coded them in the next slide. You'll see some of that, but essentially red was security, and broken down by athletics or academic. So not going to read this one. Next. This is probably the best, just general summary. So the first graph there in the lower right is all those items all together, the full budget, and how much of the work would go towards either academic or safety. And then what's probably more realistic and discussed as the highest priority fall mostly from 30, or between 25 to 35 and up. So we use items 1 through 30 to look at the potential scope of work over the next 5 years. And you can see pretty evenly spread between academics and safety, and then athletics, which are titled athletics, but obviously it's like those gym spaces that are being used throughout the day by all different groups, including physical education. So they're not purely athletic improvements. And then there were just true maintenance items that would be addressed as well. That was our summary. Are there questions or discussion?
I remember we had this discussion. Looks like you talked to some of the teachers and figured out what kind of cars they had, carried it to the building. But at any point, are we going to talk to, primarily maybe in high school, to get a little bit of feedback from the students?
So what we would suggest, if there's scope identified within, like say, science, there's going to be I don't know if we're going to call it a steering committee, but a user focus committee. And it would include key faculty and then nominate 1 to 2 students depending on. And so like the high school will probably have like 4, kind of like the media center, take a couple kids from the book club or innovation club and put them on there as well. Yeah. And we also can do input and survey, like feedback, where you have imagery boards, right? So design aesthetic or furniture, and lay those things out, and they do the kind of the survey with Post-it notes and comments to really involve them.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you again.
Thank you. So obviously the process is very extensive. There'll be a lot more input and feedback opportunities. Certainly we'll need to work through and look at some of the priorities and work together with the board to kind of look at the scope of what we might do. Certainly as we do identify themes, we will involve stakeholder group, steering committee, whatever we title that, for some additional input and feedback in looking at design. Just to be clear, so our debt service fund, we have some debt that will be falling off, and we will need to be replacing that debt with new debt that will fund these projects through the form of a bond sale. And just to be clear, the debt service fund and these bond sales are specifically for capital projects, renovations, and improvements. And they can't be used for things such as salaries and benefits. So we obviously have a duty to make sure that we offer safe facilities, certainly facilities that offer a good environment for teaching and learning to take place. And so I appreciate the time spent by KRM and all of the different individuals that participated in the input and the feedback and all of the different meetings. Because we will need to continue to work together to move this process forward to determine at a future meeting what type of scope or how large of a project we wish to continue.
Yeah, I think it's important to say too, Jeff, that we won't enter into any plan that would require an increase in property tax rates. It's going to be stable.
Debt service tax rate neutral.
Right.
Yeah, we just want to maintain what we have.
Yeah, no increased cost to taxpayer in any of these projects.
But also on that front, it's not reasonable to expect that we're going to be able to get all of that list accomplished at once. unless somebody's going to donate all the money. But I think it's reasonable to expect that there is a large chunk potentially that we would be able to complete.
Okay.
It's exciting.
Yes. So. Okay, the last item on the agenda is other business. Does anyone have any other business? Okay, hearing none. Last item on the agenda is adjournment. I have a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
So that is the first meeting. We're adjourned.
Everybody's like, uh-oh.
I guess we'll let people have a chance to get out. If they want.
Yeah, if you need to leave, that's fine. We have our Board of Finance meeting next.
Thank you.
You too, Jerry?
Thank you, neighbor.
Good night, man.
Okay, we will call to order the annual Board of Finance meeting. First thing on the agenda is new business. Mr. Gibney.
Yep, so this is an annual meeting that we have to have, and so the first thing we need to do is elect officers for the Board of Finance. So I don't know how the board wants to handle that, or if sometimes you mirror that with the regular officers. That's entirely up to you.
It does not matter to me.
I guess I'd make a motion to mirror the board officers.
Yeah, 1 second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to mirror the Board of Finance officers with the school board member officers. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Next on the is a review of the Greencastle Community School Corporation investments.
Yes, so I seem to always misplace this paper. So we don't have any traditional investments, but I did just want to share that basically for all of our bank accounts, we earned a grand total of $19,467.45 in interest from all of our funds for the year 2020 on our bank accounts in total.
So where does that money go?
That money is receipted back into the education fund. That's a good question.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a review of WUAB fiscal qualitative indicators.
Yep, so the DUAB Distressed Unit Appeals Board, these are the fiscal indicators. This is a new requirement. This requirement's new for this year is that at the annual Board of Finance meeting, I have to obviously have to share these with the public and share these with the board. One of the things you'll notice in looking through kind of just a general summary of our school corporation profile is the first slide. The second slide shows the trend of our average daily membership. And you can see that since 2012 all the way through to 2021, you can see that there's been a slow annual decline. The fund balances, so you'll note that this is a year in the rear, so we don't have this for 2020, but this is years 2012 through 2019. And you can see the color code legend on the far right hand side, but you can see that I want to pick out here that light green color for the year 2019, but then also the darker blue color for prior to 2019. So that would be the education fund or our general fund. And if you look back from 2012 to 2015, the education fund / general fund, it grew, but then in 2016, you can see that from 2016 to 2019, it decreased each year. And I'd mentioned earlier that we were in deficit finance, or deficit spending with our expenditures exceeding our revenue. And you can see that decline, that's why, because we were overspending. So we want to reverse that trend and see it grow. So that way we do have a cash balance to help get us through some of those tougher times. You can see that operation fund, for the most part, that's remained steady. The rainy day fund, for the most part, that's also decreased. You can see it increased a little in 2019. And it will again in 2020, but obviously we've allocated some expenses there. So just to show that to you. And a good balance, per se, the term that I hear is you really want about 15% of your budgeted expenditures as a cash reserve in each of those funds. So that kind of equates to about 3 months worth of expenditures. We're not anywhere near that. If you look at the annual deficit surplus on the next slide, you can see this just compares revenue versus expenditures, and you can see that we were to the black, or in the end of the year in the black. So this is all of our funds. We ended the year in the black in 2016, but for the last 3 years, our expenditures have exceeded our revenue. So that's something that we monitor on a daily basis, and we will right the ship, and we'll fix it and head back the other way. The next slide, fund balances is percent of expenditures. I've kind of mentioned before, having those cash reserves. You can see again, this is very similar to just our fund balances. As our fund balances have gone down, obviously our fund balances as percent of expenditures have also gone down. The next slide, the revenue by type. So we obviously receive a lot of different revenue sources, through bonds, through federal funds, through state funds, through state tuition support, and then obviously through property taxes and all of those other types of things. So this just kind of helps illustrate the piece of the pie each of those things is. So it's just kind of good to look at. The next slide is operating referendum revenues, percent total of revenue. Obviously, we don't generate any revenue through our operating referendum. And then the last slide is just more information for you or the public to review some of those, any of those items for transparency or the transparency portal. So wanted to share those with you. That's something that we will do annually, but obviously also I'm going to keep you updated at a higher level throughout the year. Anybody have any questions on that?
Okay, next item on the agenda is board member superintendent comments. Does anyone have any comments?
I'm glad that we pointed out what our EDM has been, and we'll be able to appropriately budget in anticipation of what it could become. So, no blips or anything there. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, last item on the agenda is adjournment. Once again. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So move.
We have a motion and a second or two. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think they heard I was gonna.